We see all this economic activity around us, right? Big investments, luxury brands, the whole shebang. But have you ever stopped to think about what's underneath it all? There's this quiet, invisible architecture, a set of rails, really, that decides how fast and how far money can actually move. And today, we're diving into a massive, massive shift in those rails on the African continent. This is a big one. Yeah, this is the kind of system that almost never makes headlines. Nobody really celebrates it, and yet it underpins everything. It literally dictates the speed of money. And changing a system like that, well, that's not just some technical upgrade. No, it's way, way bigger than that. And look, we're talking about massive scale here. These payment systems, they're so much more than just code and servers. They're basically a declaration of financial independence. They answer a really fundamental question. Who gets to control how a country's, or in this case, a whole continent's wealth moves around? This quote from Grace Mumo, that just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Economic sovereignty begins the moment money stops asking permission to move. That totally reframes this whole story. It's not just about finance anymore. It's about control, it's about independence, and it's about completely rethinking how money should be flowing across Africa. Okay, so to really get why this new system is such a game changer, you've got to understand what it's replacing, the old way of doing things. For decades, the system for sending money between African countries had this huge, expensive flaw baked right into its DNA. And this is how backwards it was. Just get this. Say you wanted to send money from Nairobi, Kenya to Lagos, Nigeria. You'd think the most direct route would be, well, across the continent, right? Nope. The money would actually have to leave Africa, bounce through a bank in London or New York or Paris, and then come back. It's insane. And every single stop along that detour meant more fees, forced currency conversions, and huge delays. And the wildest part? That wasn't a mistake. That was the system. Right. And there's a great term for this, economic gravity. Think of it like a force that was constantly pulling value away from the continent with every single transaction. So it wasn't just about the money being lost, though that's huge. It was about lost competitiveness, missed opportunities, and time just, poof, evaporating. And the scale of that loss, it's just staggering. We're talking an estimated $5 billion every single year. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire annual GDP of several African countries. That's money that could have been reinvested, building roads, growing businesses, funding thousands of startups. Just gone. And it wasn't just about the cash either. It was about time. You're losing 3 to 5 days on every single transfer. Come on, in today's world where everything moves in seconds, that is an eternity. It's like having a built-in handicap that just chokes off trade and grinds progress to a halt. So let's be clear here. This wasn't just a problem for a few countries. This was a structural issue, basically a hidden tax that was hitting all 54 nations on the continent. A problem this big, this widespread, well, it was screaming for a continent-wide solution. And that is exactly where the story pivots. It brings us to the solution. And we're not talking about just a little update or a patch. We're talking about a fundamental rewiring of how business gets done across the continent, a completely new path forward. So what is it? It's called PAPSS, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. And what it does is actually beautifully simple. At its core, it's one single platform for the whole continent, and it's designed to do one thing and do it brilliantly. Let African businesses trade directly with other African businesses in their own local currencies. Simple as that. Just look at the difference compared to the old way. It is night and day. That crazy detour through London or New York? Gone. Replaced by a direct financial artery. Those forced currency conversions? Gone. Now you settle in local currency. Value stays on the continent where it belongs. And settlements happen almost instantly. But here's the most important part. That old dependency on outside banks is replaced with real financial sovereignty. And that's why this is so much bigger than just faster payments. You know that Mupo quote? Infrastructure does not make headlines, but it makes empires. That's it. Right there. This kind of deep, fundamental infrastructure is the stuff that enables growth on an absolutely epic scale. It's the foundation for everything that's coming next. All right, so we've got the problem, we've got the solution. Now let's talk about the ripple effects. And this is the really exciting part. When you change something as fundamental as how money moves, you change everything. Think about the potential this unlocks. It's enormous. All those crazy complex barriers that made it almost impossible to operate across 54 different markets, they just start to dissolve. Suddenly, a fashion designer in Accra can sell to a customer in Addis Ababa without a second thought. A software developer in Kigali can easily bill a client in Cairo. What you're seeing is the birth of a true, single continental market. It's a complete change in direction for the flow of capital. For so long, money was forced to flow out of the continent first. It was kind of like a colonial hangover. But now it can flow laterally, like a superhighway connecting African markets directly to each other. It's about building prosperity from the inside out. So I hope it's clear by now that this is not some boring back office IT story. If you're a business leader, an investor, a policymaker, anyone paying attention, understanding this shift is an absolute strategic imperative for owning the next decade. Because here's the real key takeaway, the big so what. Removing all that friction doesn't just make things faster. That's the obvious part. The real magic is that it creates entirely new markets, markets that literally could not exist before. It completely changes the definition of what's even possible in business. So let's break down what this actually means for you. If you're in luxury or really any consumer brand, it means you can finally start thinking of Africa as one single accessible market of 54 countries. For you investors out there, this is about getting in ahead of the curve. The big opportunity is right here, right now, before this becomes yesterday's news. And if you're a policymaker, this is a massive call to action to create the regulations that will pour fuel on this fire and accelerate the change. At the end of the day, this whole thing isn't about asking for a seat at the global economic table. It's about building a bigger, better table right at home. It's about finally having the infrastructure that matches the sheer scale of the continent's ambition. And that really leaves us with one final crucial question. It's a question every leader, every investor, every entrepreneur should be asking themselves right now. Are you building your strategy for the Africa that was? You know, the one with all the old friction and roadblocks? Or are you building for the Africa that is emerging right before our eyes, one that's connected, incredibly ambitious, and financially sovereign? Because how you answer that question, well, that's going to define who wins the next decade.